Hi, and welcome to this webinar on project costs and margins. My name is Richard Vernon. I'm one of the pre-sales consultants here at 4PS. And today I want to talk about a couple of concepts. One is looking at a project before it started to try and ascertain what kind of margin we're expecting that project to make. Next, we want to keep an eye on the margins during the life of the project to make sure the margin is still looking good, or is it going up, is it going down, just to check out exactly where we are. We then want to look across the entire business to see what the effect of those individual project forecasts are across the business. Now, this slide is really just here to illustrate a point, and that point is that when you're looking at a construction project at any point in time, there's an awful lot of things going on. There's an awful lot of information getting mashed together. So you've got estimates, you've got payments, you've got invoices, payment notices, timesheets, forecasts, expenses, everything going on. They all might, even worse, be happening in different places. So you might have spreadsheets here, you might have systems there, you might have reports coming off. And it's very, very difficult and challenging to work out at any point in time exactly where you are with a construction project. So what we're going to do is try and make that look a bit easier. And what I'll do is I'll flick over into the software and we'll take a quick look. Okay, so this is 4PS and I'm logged in as a project manager. So the things that you see on the screen, so the menu items at the top and the queues down here and the sort of selection boxes here are all focused around project management type activities. Now, there's lots and lots of different role centres with 4PS. There's about 30, 35 different role centres that you can have, all tailored to different jobs within a construction company. So for today, I'm focusing on this project management role because it's quite generic and there's quite a lot of stuff we can do directly from the main screen. Okay, so let's go and have a look at some projects. Okay. Now on this screen, you can see we've got a list of individual projects here, and you can filter them by the status, by the project manager, by the client, all sorts of different things. Now, if I open up the screen a bit more, we can see this is a nice little screen this for looking across a series of projects. So this initial stage shows us kind of more or less our opening position of the project. So the revenue position that we're expecting comes from the contract amount. The cost position comes from the budget. The difference between those two is our opening margin, and the budgeted result there is our margin percentage. So we've got an opening position which is pretty good. We can look across and see where we are with a number of projects. Now, you don't necessarily have to have a massive detail in order to come up with really nice figures like this. Because if we look at the Greentrack Cycleway project, for example, that's 649,000 in there. When you click on it, it's just made up of a couple of lines. So in that case, somebody may have gone in and said, right, this is going to be the approximate cost per square metre, and away they go, and that's a basis for their estimate for that particular project. Now, in other cases, we've got a lot more detail. So if we go down to the Tayview project, for example, in here, we've got lots of line level detail that have come in. Now, that may have come from the 4PS estimating module. It may have come from an external estimating module. It may have come from a spreadsheet. There's all sorts of places, obviously, you can get in as well. Now, so either way, you've got a budget in there, you've got a contract amount. Now, the contract amount comes from the project itself. So if I just navigate through to a project, and we can see that in that project card, we have a client. Now, you can have multiple clients on a project, so that's absolutely fine as well. In this particular case, I've got a contract here for 7.5 million. Now, if I wanted to, that's only a high level number. You can also break that number down into its constituent parts, and that may have come from the client themselves. So if I go over here into the contract lines, you can see the 7.5 million is broken down into those individual lines. So in this case, those lines represent how the customer wants to see the application broken down. It doesn't have to bear any resemblance to your cost object structure or your work breakdown structure. It's just how the client wants to see it. So that's all good. If we then go back to the summary screen, now we can see down the bottom Wavelink is struggling a little bit because we don't have a budget for Wavelink at the moment. So we're going to go into that particular project. Let's get it selected. And when we open the project, we can see on the right hand side that there isn't currently a budget associated with it. Okay, so let's get a budget in there a quick way. So if we go further down here, we can see that there's an estimate actually linked to this particular project. So let's click on that particular estimate and go and have a quick look. Okay, so we can see there's quite a lot of cost associated here. We can drill into these details. So if we drill into the labour, for example, we can see all the different labour elements making that up. If we come out of there, we can also go and have a look at the top here, and we can see via the structure of the project where these values are coming from. Again, lots of detail making up that estimate. Now, all of that detail can be reused in the system, so you don't need to throw it away. And one way of doing that is from the estimate header. What I can do is I can process and copy the estimate through to the project budget. Now, you can use different filters on this, so I'm going to just crudely bring the whole lot in. I hit yes on that. It's going to whack that whole budget into my project. So if I come out of here now, look at my project card for Wavelink, I've now got a massive budget in there. And if I go and have a look in here, all that line level detail that we saw in the estimate is then available and can be reused. And that's really nice. So for things like procurement, having details in there are really useful. You can reuse that to create inquiries, to create orders, and all that kind of good stuff. Now, back on our summary screen at the front, we can see that Wavelink is now looking a bit behind. We've got that massive budget that's gone in there. We're into a negative margin and a negative margin percentage. So it isn't great for that particular project. Now, if I go back into it very quickly, I just want to show you, because we haven't fixed the budget yet. So on the project card, we can see that the budget isn't fixed at the moment. So that allows me to go into the budget and do what I want, really. It's still kind of it's a work in progress. So I can even be outrageous and go and delete the whole lot. So all that detail is going out of the system. Now, what I can do is, let's have a look at another way of getting that budget in. So if I import and export the budget, there's lots of options and lots of different templates you can use for this. The one I'm going to choose here is quite a straightforward spreadsheet that has a particular layout that enables the budget to get zapped straight in. So again, that's really nice. So if you come from a third-party estimating package or you use Excel to do your estimates, you can structure the data so that you can actually bring that information in to 4PS and reuse that detail. We'll be able to see that the project now is much healthier in terms of its margin, which is great. It's a great start. Now, one thing that's nice about this all being in the Business Central environment is that we can easily get the data in the background. And 4PS have actually got some nice connections into the database that you can use. So if I go into my office.com, go into Power BI. Okay, so if I open the report, we can see in here what we have is a summary of the information that we were looking at over here. So these are kind of user-generated views of the data, and you can do some really nice things. So this is looking at a kind of summary of all projects. So you can see the margin at the top there, which applies across all of the projects that we're looking at the moment. But if I go down here and I select the project we were just looking at a moment ago, Wavelink, you can see that the values at the top there have now changed and they reflect just that single project. And if I undo Wavelength, I can go and look at a different project and get a different view on the margins. Or indeed, I can say, show me the average across all of Richard Vernon's projects. And there we go, the figures are changing. So it's a really nice way of visualizing the data that is there in 4PS, but gives you ways to be creative and look at it in a different way. The next thing we're going to do is start looking at the situation as the project is developing. Okay, so we're going to have a look at this Eco Leisure project up here. Now, this particular project, or each project, has its own project control as well. And the project control within each project is broken down into more detail. So rather than just one line for project, I've got a line per cost type. If I click on subcontracting, for example, you can see down the bottom now I've got all my different subcontracting packages laid out with my budgets, my orders, values, all my actuals coming through from payment notices, etc., etc. Click on materials to see that I've got a load of material cost objects down the bottom there with all the same kind of information. So this kind of represents the project as it's flowing. You've got lots of information coming in into that project control. Now, if I close that down, another process that's continuing throughout the life of the project is forecasting. So if we go and have a look in control again, we can see that we've got a forecast against Eco Leisure. It was done earlier on in May. Now, if I go and edit that particular forecast, there's lots of details around how these forecasts are created. I don't want to go into the details right now. What I can show is in the forecast at the top, if I go into cost, for example, it will break down the project into lots of detailed sections. Now, these are configurable. So these have been done by cost type and then by cost object. But you can go into the project and forecast it by the work breakdown structure, where you have those levels in there and then the cost types and then the cost objects. So it's a greater level of detail there if you want it. And you can go through, you can modify amounts, you can drill into amounts, you can see a big picture of the entire project. Okay, so that forecast has been done. And on this front screen of the forecast, you can see you've got a bit of a workflow. So you can finish it and it can be approved. And once it's been approved, it then updates into the figures for the project. So the project control screen with the the new expected margin for the project will get updated. And the project moves on, and that happens periodically through the life of the project. This little summary over here, we can see that we've got cost to complete now summed up to 3489 and revenue of 5250. As well as cost, you've got revenue that you can forecast as well. And we've also got some nice summary screens. So we've got a project overview, which can compare the original to the previous forecast, along with lots more detail if we need it. And we also have a forecast summary, which summarizes data for us as well. So if I navigate back to the control screen, the summary screen, we can see our projects, our budgeted results. That's where we started from. We've got our forecast total revenue in there, our forecast total cost, and our forecast margin. Now, these are not all the same. So if we go down to the Quayside project, for example, we can see originally we're looking at a budget result of 2.34. We found some cost savings. So currently we're on 8.74% margin. So that's great. Okay, so that's all good. We've got our margin percentage that we expect to make on that particular project. Now, what I want to do finally is look at the project over the period of time that's remaining for it. That's the final position of the project. But obviously there's going to be ups and downs along the way. So let's have a look at a project. Let's look at this Eco Leisure project. Expand it out. Now, what I want to see is the concept of forecast by period. Okay. Again, this is a periodic process that we do In 4PS, you can see this one's got a forecast date on of when it was done. And if I open the card up, we can see in there that we have down the bottom here, if I just drag it down, and what I can do is close this section, get rid of that. And as we go across the bottom here, we can see that we've got those figures that we were talking about actually padded out over the months. Now I can change that view and have it by week, by day, by quarter, by year. Month is the typical one that people like to look at. Behind the numbers, the actual figures are broken down into details. Now, what you don't have to do is work out day by day by day exactly what you think you're going to earn and spend. What you can do in here is you can use, if I take subcontracting as an example, bring up the subcontracting items there. As I look across, okay, I've got here the ability. Now, when you first go in, you have a deviation. It's the amount that you haven't allocated across time. Okay, so what you can do is you can either allocate using a linear distribution, or you can set up an S-curve. And you can have, these are user defined, these S-curves, so you can work out the proportion of whether the spend is going to be sooner or rather than later, or is it going to be bell-shaped? Is it going to be kind of linear but with some little changes to it? And what it will do is when you choose one of those S-curves, you'll be able to distribute the allocation by the S-curve, and it will calculate out for you these months. What you'll be able to do afterwards is you'll be able to go in and make changes. So if the S-curve is sort of forecasted a particular amount and you want to change it, you'll be able to. But essentially, it gives you a really good starting point. So you can either do it completely manually, where you work out month by month by month exactly what you think you're going to spend, in this case with a particular subcontractor, or you can do it by S-curve, or you can do it by linear. And if I go back to the front screen, you'll see that actually does include revenue as well. Revenue perhaps is more of a manual allocation, perhaps. Perhaps even base it on the application roadmap that you've created in the system as well. You could use that as the basis for working out where you think these numbers are going to come from. But if I go back, that gives us a nice view for the EcoLeisure project. Now, if I go back into my office again, I've got a nice little Power BI, which is a good example of bringing together the information. So if I go back into that CBR, there was a second tab in here that I had. I'll go back into that second tab. What I've actually now got is my project cash flow over a period of time. And again, you can go in here, you can choose that EcoLeisure project we were looking at, and it gives you the flow of the values up and down over time. Or you can select all of the projects, or select multiple projects. You can have all sorts of filters in here, again by project manager, by region, by sector, whatever it is it suits. And so you can see from a business point of view, you can see where the peaks and troughs are likely to be in upcoming months. Now, another visualization similar to this would be to layer all the forecasts for a particular project on top of each other, so you could see the modifications over time of the expected outturn of that project. And you can see movements, because we're storing all of that information. All those periodic snapshots of the forecast of the project are stored and could be reported on. Okay, so what we've got then in summary is we've seen that you can put budgets into the system in various ways. As you're spending money through the life of the project and building up your forecast to complete, you've got those figures to compare to, and you can spread those forecast figures out by individual month as well. I hope during the course of this webinar that we've managed to show you a few things about 4PS and how it can be used to predict your margin for a project at the outset, to change that prediction as the project is progressing, and then analyse all your projects together to see an overall picture of margin and cash flow going forward. Okay, so thanks for watching this webinar, and keep up with the series of webinars that we have on our website. Hopefully they'll be useful as well. And if you want to find out more about 4PS, I'll leave his contact details on screen.